Well, hi there, guys, and welcome along to the latest Artist in the Spotlight feature from MAYHEM Rockabilly Productions with me, Scotty Barber, from a sort of sunny spring day here in Essex. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all happy and healthy during lockdown. Hopefully the end's in sight for this country. Stage 2 in a few weeks' time of 4 to freedom. So fingers crossed we'll get there. But during this lockdown, I wanted to bring you some entertainment, and I think we've done that so far. And I'm delighted to announce the latest artist in the spotlight is the fantastically talented young guitarist Joe Newbon. Newbon, however you want to say it. I hope I get it right, Joe. But he is probably well known to a lot of people from the Runaways, three-piece rockabilly rock and roll band, and he's also started a new project called King Joe and the Atlantics. Check him out on Facebook and YouTube. That'll be a project post-lockdown for Joe and the guys. Before we get started, before we hear the fantastic insight into this talented young musician who has just joined the Travelling Man Ricky Nelson stage show as well, fantastic. It seems to be getting better and better and better for this young man. So I'm looking forward to. I was thrilled to sit down and chat to him and hear his story. It's been fantastic. So thank you, Joe, for your cooperation. And I want to thank you all so far for your input, everybody sharing around the information, and this previous Artist in the Spotlight show with Will Collins from Fever, fantastic insight, and obviously he was the first one. It went down well, so we've got loads lined up. We've got Daryl Hyam lined up, we've got Johnny Wildheart and the Blue Lights, we've got Dylan Kurt, we've got Frankie Rydell from Honkley, we've got Rob Glazebrook from the House Rockers, and we've got a Blazing Aces movie coming out, the story of the Blazing Aces as told to you by their lead singer and guitarist Guy. So lots coming up on MAYHEM during the coming months. So stick around, stay tuned, should I say, and enjoy. So let's hear what Joe's got to say. I can't wait to listen to this. So Joe, thank you so much for doing this. It's an honour, it's a privilege to have somebody of your talent agree to do this feature for MAYHEM. It's good for us, it's good for you. But let's go back to the beginning, Joe. Let's go back to how did you get into the music? What were your influences growing up as a young boy? And what were your favourite artists in the rock and roll scene? What got you going? What got your juices flowing at such a young age?
50s rock and roll music's always been there since before I can even remember, with my dad. My uncles, my grandparents, most of my dad's side of the family really have all been involved in, the rock and roll for many, many years at some point. My grandparents, and especially my grandma and her brothers and that kind of thing, they were there first time around in the 50s. My dad was sort of like the second generation 70s revival era sort of rocker, and then obviously in the early 80s when the rockabilly thing came about, he was heavily involved in that. And same with my uncles and that kind of thing. So it's always been there since, like I say, before I can even remember. When I was very, very young, I was big into like the classic rock and roll. I was always into Elvis, Gene Vincent, Eddie Cochran. Eddie Cochran's always been the main one for me, really, along with sort of Jerry Lee, Fats Domino, that kind of thing. And when I was old enough to gain enough trust to work my dad's record player and flick through his records, I was discovering the likes of Matt Curtis, Charlie Feathers and all that kind of thing, along with some of the sort of revival and neo-rockabilly stuff as well. I always remember loving the Buzz and the Flyers LP, sorry. Eddie Cochran was always the main influence for me. I mean, I remember seeing the clip of him from 1959 in Go Johnny Go, the movie, where he sings Teenage Heaven, and that was what really, really attracted me. I was always into it and I was always running around and dancing to it as a kid, but that really grabbed my attention and sparked something that made me who I am today, I guess. So that's where all that sort of came from. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, my brother, who was 9 years age gap, he's 9 years older than me, he got just a cheap little guitar for a birthday or Christmas or something, and time went by and a string would pop and then another string would go, so eventually it got shoved under his bed and he never sort of got it out again. So one day I must have forgot about it and I discovered it underneath his bed. I had 2 strings on, something like that, and I carried it around everywhere with me. And I actually learned how to play Come On Everybody, like the intro riff on just one string, just by ear as a kid. I was probably 6 years old. So with me carrying it around everywhere, I think my dad sort of gathered that I was really interested in the guitar, and especially interested in rock and roll and rhythm and blues from the 1950s. So he put a new set of strings on the guitar, and he'd learned a little bit of guitar whilst travelling around on the road. He was in a band in the late 70s and early 80s called the Runaways, and I think he sort of picked up a little bit of a few chords and that kind of thing when he was travelling around. And he taught me how to play Peggy Sue by Buddy Holly. Like I say, I was probably 6 years old, maybe 7 by this time. I sort of learnt what I could from home. At the time we had no computers, no internet. I didn't have that until I was a little bit older. So there was no YouTube tutorials. I just sort of picked up what my dad knew, which was probably just like, you know, A, D, E, G, the sort of standard open guitar chords, you know, and picked up what I could from there. When I was about 10, I started having a couple of lessons, and but like I say, I was really keen to learn Cliff Gallup and Scotty Moore and Eddie Cochran licks, but you know, these people who I was going to for lessons from weren't really into that, didn't understand the music, didn't understand the style. So I ended up learning some basics from them, and sort of I went on and sort of taught myself in a way. All the sort of finger picking stuff and all the replications of Gene Vincent records, it was all stopping and starting records until I got it right, you know, and just trying to replicate. That's where it all came from. That's how I learned.
As you said there, Joe, there's no YouTube tutorials back in the day like they've got this day and age. Fantastic stuff there, obviously. Eddie Cochran on one string and getting taught the Peggy Sue introduction and everything like that. Once you've learned the guitar, you learn a little bit. You had a few lessons, although there wasn't lessons you really wanted, and from them guys learning the Cliff Gallup sort of stuff. But what was your first band? What is your first memory, your first band you put together back in the day?
The first band I ever was in was a bit of a family band, really. As I've mentioned previously, my dad was in bands. He was a singer and also played drums in bands in later years. So I was struggling to find people at a very early age. I was probably around 12. I was starting getting decent on guitar, that I could sing a little bit and, you know, get through a set. I was struggling to find musicians around my age, which I wanted to play in a band playing 50s rock and roll music. So my dad said, to get me started, he'd play drums. My uncle played double bass as well, and is a lead vocalist, a singer as well. So it sort of worked out well. We started doing charity events, rock and roll nights, local pub gigs, you know, like doing all 50s rock and roll, and it was really good, and that's what got me started. Eventually, I was sort of showing interest in like, you know, going around further rock and roll gigs all around the country. And it turns out a young guy who I went to school with, Danny Brown, I didn't know at the time, but he was heavily involved in the rock and roll scene, and so were his parents. And it turns out my dad and his dad knew each other from years ago. So Danny played drums at the time. I know now he plays double bass, but at the time he was playing drums, and we started up a little band. You know, we did a couple of gigs, and we both are where we are today from there, really.
Yeah, as you said there, Joe, you both went on to do good things. You're both well-known names on the rock and roll scene and rockabilly circuit. Danny obviously does his DJ. He's a great bass player. He's a great drummer. He's been in good bands as well. You've also had a really good band on the rock and roll scene, which still is existing. I know you've got a new project lined up, but how did your first band, the first proper band, the Runaways, how did that start? And what was your best gig with them? Do you recall a certain gig or a certain memory at all which stands out as that is the Runaways moment?
The Runaways started when I was about 16 years old, something like that. I'd just started college, and I was previously in a band with Kurt Jones, a band called the King Aces, who were a rock and roll band. They'd been going years before I joined them. And they were playing sort of like the jive clubs and like the jive weekenders sort of thing. And their guitar player left, and they were advertising for a guitar player. I was probably about 14 years old, and 14 or 15. And I went to audition with them, got the job, and we did, I don't know, I did about a year with them. Not too many gigs. We probably did about 10 gigs in a year, something like that. And that unfortunately finished. It was a good little band we had going. I mean, like I say, we did a lot of jivey type things, but it was good. But I was always more interested in doing some more like harder hitting rockabilly type stuff. I think that maybe be the reason why, you know, the jive clubs didn't want us as much, because I wanted to play Johnny Burnett, and you know, and they couldn't. Some of the oldest generation dancers weren't really into that. Anyway, me and Kurt still wanted to be in a band when the King Aces split up, so we were looking around for a double bass player to join up with us. And eventually, after searching for a little while, we found Jake Needham, who was from Manchester area, Stockport, and we got together. We were doing sort of classic rockabilly and some rock and roll and that kind of thing. And our first ever gig, technically, was at a little pub in Stoke, where I'm from. But the first proper rocking gig we did was at an all-dayer in Chesterfield Rock and Roll Club, their annual all-dayer. And I'm pretty sure it was a sold-out gig. There was some great bands on. And we opened up the day just to get a name out there. And we went down a storm, and within a couple of months, the whole year was completely booked up, the diary for the whole year. So we had a really good run. Jake left due to work commitments after just over a year, and from there, unfortunately, the lineup kept changing quite often, which I think you know, it was putting a lot of pressure on us all. So you know, it became more like a chore in the end, which was a shame really, because we had a really good band and a really good run, and we were popular all over the UK, and we'd even broke into France and Finland, Germany. We were doing really well. So, but I think the probably the best gig I ever did with the Runaways. We've done some really good ones. One of the highlights was both times we played at the Rockabilly Rave. Actually, the first year we played downstairs, and then the second year we got to play on the main stage in the upstairs room. If anyone's ever been to the rave, you'll know what I'm talking about. And both of them gigs were magic, really. We've had some nice compliments saying best band of the weekend sort of thing. I mean, there were some really big names on that weekend as far as rockabilly is concerned. So that's a real compliment. So yeah, that was probably a highlight. Some of the Germany gigs we did, and Finland, which is our first ever gig abroad. That was fantastic too. So there's some of my favourite gigs that I've ever done, with the Runaways, of course.
Yeah, as you said there, Joe, the Rockabilly Rave, the two stages, and obviously there's the downstairs one, the smaller sort of midday, afternoon sort of bands play there, and then the main stage, which is a compliment from, as you said, a massive step, 7 p.m. onwards you're on the main stage, and they have some great names in rockabilly, like Jittery Jack, Scotty Baker, High Tones, the Go-Getters. In recent years have had legends like Joe Clay play there as well, and Sid and Billy King. Brilliant stuff. So to get that sort of praise is fantastic. I know you said that's with the Runaways. What is your career highlight so far? Now, what would you say in the moment the career highlight for me so far is?
As far as my journey in bands and sort of that kind of thing have been concerned so far, I've been lucky enough to travel to some beautiful countries, meet some great people, share the stage with some icons. I mean, that's from the 50s and sort of modern day as well. I mean, for example, I've been involved a lot with the likes of Daryl Hyam. That's always a pleasure. People like Pete Pritchard, who was originally the bass player from Sandy Ford's Flying Saucers, but after the Flying Saucers days, he was involved with Chuck Berry, and for anyone who's into like rock blues music, he was also in Alvin Lee's 10 Years After for about 10 years, I think, actually. So working with people like that is, like say, modern day legends. That's been a real honour, and I still keep in touch with these guys, and we speak on the phone every so often. after all this lockdown's finished, we've got plans to work together again. So that's fantastic. Also, I've been involved with some promotional work as well, and I brought over to the UK from the USA Billy Harlan, who, if anyone doesn't know Bill, he was probably first introduced onto the rockabilly scene in the 70s on them old MCA Rare Rockabilly LPs that came out. Schoolhouse Rock and I Want a Bop were two strollers that are still today, they pack the dance floors out. And we got Bill over, and you know, as well as being such a rockabilly legend, he's a really nice guy, and we keep in touch. And I backed him when he was over in the UK. Just working with people like that is just a real honour. I grew up listening to Bill's music, so you know, when I was then 18 or 19 years old, sharing a stage with him, going to the local restaurants and having a meal with him, and he was telling me about his days with the Everly Brothers and Buddy Holly, Janice Martin, Moon Mullican. You know, these are all guys that, you know, I've idolised. And if you would have told me when I was first getting into the music properly, when I was about 6-7 years old, that I'd be meeting these people, then I probably would never have believed you at the time. So that's some career highlights, really.
As you said, there's some fantastic names in rockabilly, rockabilly royalty, and for you as a young man growing up with this music to then, as you said, the whining and dining with such people like that, it must be incredible. But this brings me onto your new project. It's been linked, it's been released on social media. I saw the other week, fantastic lockdown video, which we'll see after you've explained. Your new project, King Joe and the Atlantics, it looks fantastic. It's a real group of talented people and artists. How did you manage to get all those guys together in the first place, get them interested? Tell us who's in the band for the people watching, and what are your plans for this band?
Yeah, the new band I've got going, King Joe and the Atlantics, I've always dreamed of being involved in a sort of big band rock and roll show type thing that involves saxophones, pianos, the full job sort of thing, you know. That's always been an aspiration of mine, if you like. And just before lockdown kicked in, I'd finalised plans to get the band together. I'd contacted some really, really good musicians from the UK who specialise in this kind of music. Both younger guys and also you know, people who've been around for years who are renowned for this kind of music. They were all interested right away, and when I explained what kind of thing I was interested in doing, I was lucky enough to have these guys jump at the opportunity, which is a real pleasure. You know, it's an honour. We got Mark Kemlow on the drums. I mean, he's been around on the rock and roll scene for many, many years. Well known. If you're on the scene, you'll know Mark. He's been involved with the Slingshots, Red Hot and Blue, John Lewis, loads of people, Bill Farden's band as well. So sort of big names, people who headline rock and roll festivals and weekenders and that kind of thing. So he's one of the best out there. So Mark was first on the list to contact. Young Dylan Kirk, the young guy who's really making a big name for himself on the rock and roll scene in Europe. Real pleasure to have him on board playing the piano. Pete Lawson, double bass. Pete's a great player. I first met Pete. He opened up for a gig that the Runaways were headlining on the show in Yorkshire area, I think it was, Yorkshire or Derbyshire. And the Runaways were a three-piece band at the time, and we were all set out outside on a pickup truck from the 50s. We had one each, and we were playing on the back of these pickup trucks. And these two young guys turned up who were the support act, and they were dressed in real authentic 50s sort of drapes, not like, you know, not bright and flamboyant. It was like proper, they looked the real deal, and it was cool. And they were doing all skiffle stuff. They were doing they were just a duo, double bass and guitar. And from there I stayed in touch with Pete and Mike, who was the singer, and Pete's worked with the Runaways for a little bit, and yeah, then we've worked with each other in various different projects here and there, and now he's one of the finest young musicians on the scene, and I'm sure he's going to do great with us, because you know he knows the music like the back of his own hand, and he's actually pitch perfect as well. So I remember when we were with the Runaways with Pete, and we'd be in the van, and he'd tell us what chords were on this record that we've never played before, and we'd go to the venue and do it because he knew the chords without even picking up his bass or a guitar and playing it. So that was great. Graham Turner also is in the band on the tenor saxophone, and Graham was actually involved with the Big Town Playboys for many years. He's been involved with others as well, such as Jeff Beck, you know, all the sort of legends that are around that have been involved in the music, who are actually big icons in the world of music itself. And yeah, the Big Town Playboys are probably one of my all-time favourite bands. Mike Sanchez's Big Town Playboys, and it's a real honour to have him involved, because you know I grew up listening to the Big Town Playboys, and that's really what got me into the rhythm and blues style thing, and aspiring to be in a band that had that kind of lineup. So finally done it and got one of the main men in with us, so that's great. Who else we've got? We've got Alfie Locke, who's a friend of mine. He's a great young guitar player, especially when it comes to blues music. You know, he's big into his Magic Sam and you know, John Lee Hooker and all that kind of thing. And Alfie's a real nice guy. I've known him, you know, since we were in our teens, early teens, mid to early teens, and you know, he's a great guitar player, and I just wanted to have him on board because he's going to be good, he's going to be great, and he's already well known on the scene, and so is family. So it's great to have Alfie and probably my best friend on board as well, so that's really nice. It's a nice little touch to the band, I guess. Lottie B as well, Charlotte Beatty. She's a fantastic renowned musician when it comes to rhythm and blues, rock and roll, swing, big band stuff. She's sort of like a go-to sort of musician when anyone needs a saxophone player. She's playing baritone for us in the new band. So like I say, we have involved sort of renowned musicians in this new band, so it's going to be good. It's going to be good. And of course we have been booked for multiple gigs so far, including the Hot Rock Weekender next May in Staffordshire. All details for that can be found on our Facebook page, King Joe and the Atlantics, and also the guys who are involved in promoting that Hot Rock Promotions. So look it up. It's going to be a fantastic weekend. That.
When I do what you did, when you did what you done last night to me. Do what you did when you held me oh so tight. Yeah, do what you did when the lights were low, just me and you and the radio. Do what you did when you did what you done last night. Oh, and the hoo up a little bit, bit up a little city hole. Yeah, oh yeah, hoo up a little bit, bit up a little city hole. Well, do what you did when you held me close, when you made my soul rose. Do what you did when you did what you done last night. Well, who up a little bit, bip up a little, said whoa. When I do what you did, when you did what you done last night. When I do what you did, when you held me oh so tight. Well, do what you did when the lights When you made my soul rose, do what you did when you did what you done last night. When I do walk a little bit, bop a little, said boom.
Originally, when we were setting the band up, we said that, you know, we'd play. We want to aim ourselves towards weekenders, festivals, all days, that kind of thing. We don't say I don't want to burn the band out. I know a lot of bands, they get a name for themselves, they become popular, and then next thing you know, you're seeing them everywhere. So that can get a little bit tiring, and when it gets tiring for the people, it gets tiring for the band, because you go from being this, you know, this band that's really popular and no one can get enough, to like, oh, we saw them last week, or we've you know, that kind of thing. So I've always said, with this being sort of like a dream band, a dream lineup, I'm not going to burn the candle at both ends, sort of thing. So we want to play when we want to play, when we're all available, if we're up for it, that kind of thing, you know. And I'm really eager to go out, and I wish we could play every night, but I'm going to be tactical about it, and I hope it works out the way that we want it to, because this is one heck of a band, and we've got one heck of a set list involving some old rhythm and blues, and, you know, piano and sax-based rock and roll and rockabilly involved in there as well as some of our own material as well, which we will be recording at some point and putting out. So keep an eye out for that as well. It's going to be good. So as far as my plans go for the band, you know, I just want to get out there and give people what they want, make people happy. It's what rock and roll music's all about. With the teenage cutie, don't say maybe, you just gotta hug me tonight, teenage baby, don't refuse me, you just gotta hug me tonight, you gotta tickle my chin, run your fingers through my hair, you gotta sit real close, whisper in my ear, you gotta say you care, you be my gal. Well, I wanna be more than a pal, so a teenage cutie, don't refuse me, please don't tease me, and I'll rock and roll the rest of the night. Cuddle up and hold me tight, you gotta kiss me honey, kiss me right, you gotta say you care, you be my gal. Well, I wanna be more than a pal, so a teenage cutie, say you love me, please don't tease me, and rock and roll the rest of the night. Well, the teenage cutie, teenage cutie, teenage cutie, rock and roll the rest of the night. Well, I'll make it alright from Monday morning to Friday night. Oh, those lonely weekends since you left me. Well, I'm as lonely as I can be. Oh, those lonely weekends, said you'd be good to me. You said our love would never die. You said you'd be good to me. But baby, you didn't even try. Well, I make it alright from Monday morning to Friday night. Oh, those lonely